leaders across the aisle have been busy crisscrossing the country, literally campaigning, but disguising themselves as either fundraising or inspecting development projects. Now, what is appalling is the insults and invectives that the gatherings aimed at dismantling presumed rivalry, but whose net effect is to plant the seed of discord. Now, this is what bothers us and which we feel must stop. President Kenyatta, his deputy William Ruto, and Raila Odinga, plus other political bigwigs, have a responsibility to the population of maintaining peace and sobriety. A country cannot permanently be on a campaign mode. It is like ours is a case where vote search begins immediately an election is concluded, which raises a question. Why do the politicians then seek power? Yet, before elections, the politicians roll out manifestos that outline their programs of action. They spell out activities they seek to undertake should they get elected. Thus, it is expected that once they are sent to power, their business is to execute those programs. But that is not the case. Now, today, any visitor coming into the country will be forgiven for imagining that the country is on the threshold of yet another election. Yet, the next election is about 3 years away. The public is fatigued and yearns for quietude. High-pitched campaigns clocked in fundraisers, prayer sessions, or inspection of development projects must end. Political leaders should spare the public the senseless battles. Now, tonight, we borrow in the words of Michelle Obama. As she says, "I want a president with a record of public service, someone whose life's work show our children that we don't chase fame and fortune for ourselves. We fight to give everyone a chance to succeed." My guest tonight, Kamotho Waiganjo, Wanjiru Gikonyo, Junet Mohammed is on the way, and Miruru Waweru. My name is Ken Mijungu. Welcome to our program tonight. Join the conversation. As always, the hashtag is Sidebar. At NTV Kenya, at Ken Mijungu. Sidebar begins right now.
So we did an assessment, and by and large, we believe the structure of governance really, there's no evidence to change it in the way that has been suggested by a number of political actors. There are one or two places where there needs to be tweaking, but by and large, we believe the Constitution is not working as it should be because there's not been full implementation. We are now getting to 9 years after 2010, but still there's no full implementation of the Constitution. We can look at it sector by sector or chapter by chapter, but generally we see a theme running through most of the chapters we look at, that there is incomplete implementation. So the question is, should we first fully implement the Constitution before we talk about critical changes to the Constitution? Or should we change it now when we don't even know what, the full potential that it could have because of the incomplete implementation?
A good place and obviously the right place to begin this conversation. Now, that was during a forum between Katiba Institute and other civil societies. And let me begin with you because you were at that forum. The ideology, what was being said out there is that we need to implement what we have. I'll get to the details of stuff that have not been implemented. But the question is, do you agree? I know you were at that forum, so probably you support it. But what informs your support for let's implement before we attempt to amend?
I think it's, you know, a basic tenet that the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. And we are in a situation where Parliament, which is our lawmakers, are part of the biggest offenders of the supreme law of the land. They ignore court rulings. They are in contempt of court, you know, regularly. This also mirrors what's happening with the national executive. So we have a culture of lawlessness that actually is permeating the country, and this is being set at the national level. So in reviewing the Constitution, we were basically going back to what did Kenyans promise, what did we promise ourselves as Kenyans? How far have we come? Because we don't want to let the politicians set the agenda for us. We want to say as Kenyans, this constitution belongs to us. We are the ones who enacted it, and we want Kenyans to own it and insist that it needs to be implemented and to, push back against this culture of lawlessness. So this was really a celebration of the constitution, remind ourselves how important it has been, how it is to break with the past of autocratic leadership, to break with the past of ingrained impunity, to break with the past of victimization of parts of the country because they want in the right ethnic group, want in the right political party. Our constitution is a reform, it's a agenda, it's a vision of a better, equitable, inclusive Kenya. Okay. And so we must make all strides to stop the political class. And, the constitution is a citizen project. And this constitution was actually forced on the political elite. And the last, and as you heard Christine say, she's the executive director of Katiba Institute, you heard her say that in 9 years, we don't have as much to show for it as we should, because this political elite is kicking and screaming, resisting the constitution. Okay. So as citizens, we need to double down and tell them, this is our will, you need to implement or get out.
Okay. And this, what they're saying, goes against one of the things you're doing, because as Third Way Alliance, your aim is to ensure there's a change or a review of the Constitution. I know your concern is about the huge wage bill, but that's just one of them. Yes. But when you hear the civil society, Katiba Institute, talk about, stop, let's do this first, don't you think you undermined effectively?
One of the things is, a constitution is a living document. It is not static like the Bible and the Quran, which you can't revise. So, if you look at the times we are in, there are several aspects of the lives of the Kenyans that need to be changed now, not tomorrow. For example, we have a parliament that is completely ineffective and is consuming about 42 billion shillings, almost like more than 10% of what is devolved for 410 people. We need to reduce that budget. We made a proposal to reduce the total budget of Parliament to 0.3% of the previously audited revenues of government. That if you work with the most recent revenues, it would come to around 4.8 billion shillings. And we have also restricted the amount that will be used for salaries and allowances for members of Parliament to only 20% of Parliament's budget. Okay. You see, these are solutions that are needed now, because that child, that poor person who doesn't have clean water in this country needs that clean water today. So we cannot wait to audit this constitution in the next 10 years as people stay without what they really need. Those people who don't have access to health care. Like, for example, if we save like 37 billion shillings from Parliament, that is money enough which can buy a lot of drugs for a lot of Kenyans. Okay. And it will save many lives. Okay. So those people need to live now.
You've gone to specifics, tomorrow, which I was going to discuss. You've really gone to specifics. Yes. But I just want what crosses your mind when you hear the civil society and Katiba Institute saying, no, not now.
That's the question I'm answering. I'm saying the Constitution is a living document and can be amended anytime there's need.
Okay. So you're disagreeing with them that we should do this?
We are actually not disagreeing with them, as in disagreeing, because you see we have a proposal which is backed by 1.4 million people.
Okay.
That means it's not Third Way which is speaking, it's the people who are speaking.
But you sourced for the signatures?
Sourced for the signatures.
Yes, you went around collecting the signatures.
Yes.
They didn't come to Third Way Alliance. So it's like forcing your will on the people. Please sign for us this, right?
No. Listen, we didn't do that. What we did, we explained to the people what we want.
And they agreed with you and gave you the signatures.
And then we also went, if you go to our website, the whole Punguza Mizigo bill is there. People can read. We have given justifications to every reason out of the 16 reasons, and all cogent reasons.
Okay. I'm coming to Kamodo shortly, but you mentioned when you were speaking that Parliament is most ineffective and there's no justification for spending the 42 billion per year. Is that entirely true, that Parliament is ineffective in the last 6 years of the last life of Parliament? You never saw anything Parliament did.
Let me tell you how ineffective this Parliament has been.
Yes.
The day Kibaki left presidency in 2013, this country had a debt of 1.7 trillion shillings since independence. In the last 6 years, the debt now is grown up to 5.6 trillion shillings.
Okay.
When you go on to the ground, like us, people who have gone to the ground, like when we are collecting signatures, people are very angry because their lives still, the standard of living are still deteriorating. Though the numbers churned out by Treasury, which we think they could even be cooked, they are saying we are growing by 6% every year. That is, they are not trickling down to the ordinary person, Mwananchi.
Okay.
So with a parliament that did not control even borrowing by the national government, it is not delivering.
Okay, that's just one area.
That is one area. There are many areas.
There are many areas. I'll come to you. Something they're saying not yet. You have been involved in the constitutional process for quite a long time. Yeah. Do you think it's time, or we should sit back and first implement what we have?
In an ideal world, we would look at the constitution, see where the challenges are. In any case, we pass this constitution with some challenges and continue to clean it. But we need to inform ourselves that we don't have an inexhaustible supply of political energy. And if we have only so much energy and so much resources and so much resources that we can utilize to push the nation to one direction, the question is, where should we be utilizing that energy? Okay. Is it in amending a constitution? I don't believe so.
Okay.
You know, and so my view is that let us first look at how far we have come. And let me start with a positive note. Okay. The truth of the matter is that we have made some strides. And I think we need, sometimes people look at the constitution and I think it has collapsed. The reality is that we forget how far we have come. And there are some things we have done. We have a revamped judiciary, we have separation of powers, not perfect. We have a devolution system, it may not be perfect. A lot of the changes we have done, we've gone there kicking and screaming, but we have gone there. The reality is that we have not implemented, I would say off the top of my head, 50% of the constitution.
Okay.
And those areas we have not implemented are the ones that really matter to the people. If you listen to the conversation about what we want to change, it is not about what is of concern to the people. Okay. It is what is concerned to the leaders. We need to expand the executive so that we can have 3-4 more people. Out of 40 million shillings, 40 million Kenyans, we want to expand this, expand the other. So the issue is, yes, the constitution has challenges. But should our focus not be on the 50%, which we all agree is right, and empower that, improve that, and then say, having now seen after 10 years how far we have come, can we now tweak here and there? And let's not forget that these issues are not in isolation. 3 years ago, we spent a couple of, maybe $1 billion or so, collecting views. I think the WUCO committee, the one that was reviewing, the one that was set up by Parliament, it was headed by the Auditor General, to check what the challenges of implementing the Constitution was. We haven't even looked at that report. You know, we spend money on it. We haven't gone to that report and say, what is it that we have done wrong? What requires to be changed in the Constitution? If that is where we were starting, I would listen. But so far, we are rushing to resolve issues of politicians without asking the question. If you ask Wanjiko or Atieno on the street, what are really the issues of concern? And are all those issues of changing the Constitution, or are they issues of implementing the Constitution? And I would say 80% of our problems are about the fact that we have not implemented that for which Wanjiko signed.
And that you say is 50% of the Constitution.
And I'm being generous. If you pick, really? I'm being very, very generous. If you take any of the chapters of the Constitution, start on citizenship, go to land and environment, go to leadership and integrity, 10% implemented, go to the executive, go to public finance, go to devolution. I'm being very generous when I say 50%. So why should we be utilizing our energies? And I agree, it's a good thing to reform. We must keep reforming. But I think we'll lose the focus if now we start picking new issues before we have sorted out these ones. Finally, Mijungu, let us not lie to ourselves that our problem is a problem of law. You know, and that all these problems of Kenya, if we have a new law, a changed constitution, you know, that finally will resolve our problems. We need to ask the question, why is it that a very progressive constitution is not producing a progressive country? If we have not answered that question, we're not helping ourselves. What is that problem? What is lacking in our values? What is lacking in our principles? That is where our problem is. That's a conversation we should be having. Okay. Not about more changes and here and there. As much as I agree that we need some changes, that shouldn't be our focus.
Okay. It bothers me, 50% of the Constitution, because we could pick a few chapters, but when you say 50% of the Constitution has not been implemented, is this one of the things you found out during you look at the Constitution?
Well, obviously, quantifying in that manner is difficult because some of these things are very qualitative. But yes, when we look at devolution, for instance, and I must stress, it's not all civil society in the meeting who feel we shouldn't go into a referendum.
Okay.
There are some who do. But the general sentiment of the meeting, the sentiments coming out from Katiba with regard to the process they undertook, the audit, was that we have not implemented. And the problem is a problem of political culture. So what the big barriers, for instance, in devolution, is the acceptance by the Senate, by the National Assembly, that this is a devolved system, we need to support it. That acceptance isn't there. So we find Senate, that's supposed to be the protector of the Constitution, in some cases are passing legislation that undermine devolution. Instead of protecting the county governments. Public participation, we find a lot of laws have been passed, whereas there are considerable gains, citizens are still not able to influence development decisions. The article on 174, in terms of giving self-governance to the people, is very far away. On public participation, for instance, I would say, in terms of getting the framework, legal framework, we've done very well. In terms of the actual, we are very far. So I completely agree with Kamodo, and in some extent also agree with the third way. I think they want to go for a referendum process. And we're saying we've identified the same problems, but we are saying the solution cannot be
lies within
another big political movement. Actually, that political movement, which is this proposed referendum, is being used to structure opportunities. It's a political settlement. And it's a succession plan. It's you know, the administration that's there trying to tie up the succession, and it's a political arrangement. And Kenyans are pawns in this. And we also, what happens to the country? When we get fixated on the referendum process, we forget where we are now. And we have very dire issues, whether it's the debt issue that has been mentioned here, whether it's the non-implementation of the Constitution. Right now, we are facing an imminent shutdown of government. We are facing...
Both national and county?
It should be. In respect to the budget...
Division of
the division of revenue. That is a, you know, it's a very big thing. And it's very sad that, you know, this government is very good at PR and spin. They are masters of spin. And when one problem starts, they are able to create another storm somewhere. You chase that storm and you leave the bigger issues. So what we were saying is, let's get to the fundamentals. The idea of auditing the Constitution was to say, these are the facts we should be focusing on. Let's not get distracted with the political sentiments and this idea of big political movements. Let's focus.
Unfortunately, we can't ignore the politicians, because I'm going to ask you a question.
We're not saying we ignore them. We're just saying we don't have to fall into the trap.
The trap that they are laying for us.
If I was going to say, one of my greatest fears about this process is who will own it.
Who will own it? Can you hold your thoughts? Can you hold your thoughts? Because we're coming back. We need to take a quick break. When we come back, I'd like to address that, because the politicians are coming hard, and the civil society, not all of them, as you say, and obviously that question is important. Who will own this process? Will it be taken away from Wanjiku? So when we come back, I'd like to talk about that. So let's take the first break. We'll be back.
Welcome the Molfix Band. Molfix, with its double absorbent system,
Right, welcome back. Junet is still not here, but he says he's going to come. It's very important for Parliament to answer the question of what they are doing exactly. So we'll still keep that seat for Junet Mohammed. But I'm here with Wajiro Gikoi. They're helping us with the conversation. Waweru from Third Way Alliance and, of course, the advocate Kamodho Waiganjo to help us. I know I stopped you, but fundamentally, as you answer that question, is it possible that this process is taken away from the politicians? Because it seems as though the politicians have a grasp. And even as you answer that, think of the civil society, Katiba Institute. Can they withstand that pressure from the politicians?
The truth of the matter is that it's not going to be easy. The reality is that politicians control public space. And for some reason, we are very amenable. We can't stand politicians right now, but somehow when they come to campaign on an issue, we want to die for them. The truth of the matter is that Kenyans have to start taking responsibility for their welfare. We cannot all be wringing our hands and saying, oh, you know, now we are at the mercy of politicians. Okay. This country is about you and I. My fear, and that is why I say my fear about the reform process right now, is who will own it, who will control it. If you listen, and that's why I started by saying, if you listen to the conversation on the reform agenda, it is not even about the issues that we had in, you know, when we were passing the constitution in 2010, there were some issues we all agreed were problematic, you know, issues of abortion, issues of land. Those issues are no longer there. The issues you hear on the table are about expanded political space. Expand the space of the executive, create a third tier of government. Those are the issues on the table. Those issues resolve politicians' problems. As a people, we need to be able to say, collectively, media, civil society, religious sector, and say, that's okay. If you're going to amend those, if we're going to go through a process, if you're going to amend those, there are the following things that we must have as a people. Okay. So that we also...
And who speaks to this? Who speaks on behalf of these people?
When we were making those the Constitution, how did people get together? There's no law that was made for how citizens got together. Citizens who are like-minded, and that's why I talked civil society, religious sector, the media, trade unions, we got together and said, look, this is our country. Let's, for example, say, if you're going to bring in those other issues, reduce the size of parliament, reduce the size of the county assemblies, increase the money for county governments, because that money, even with the wastage, it's still better spent at the county governments. Reduce the wage bill of the executive. Reduce the size of the national government. If you can do these 5, then you bring yours. We must be able to negotiate. Okay. So the first thing would be saying is first implement, but if you must have a referendum, these are the 5 things that we will put on the table.
Okay. Yeah. Well, we're listening to them, and they agree that there's about 50%, and we'll talk about the specifics next. But does it now ring a bell in your mind, the bell of implementation first before we can review?
No, when I listen to Waiganjo, I see him taking a perspective of a view of a referendum proposal that some of them which we have had with people talking in funerals, bars, and streetwise. But if we are talking about a constitutional amendment proposal, there is only one in the street. There is no other proposal except the Punguza Mizigo
that we have proposal. Right now, at least.
There's no other one.
Yes.
Anything else is just being talked about, wish lists, and people have not given reasons why they want to amend the constitution, except Third Way has given reasons to create a prime minister position and several deputies so that they cater for some big tribal warlords or tribal chiefs. Will we create enough positions for the 44 or 45 tribes in this country to feel accommodative? And that is where we come up with a solution like in Third Way. Let us increase more money to the wards so that we can deliver more services to all Kenyans. And the Kenyans at the grassroots are the people who are not included in this country. The elite political class is more included than enough.
Okay.
So the idea of inclusion is about Wajiko. It's not about Wajiko, Adhiambo, Mweni, the ordinary citizen. It is not about including tribes. Because even if your tribe, your tribesman lives there, is at the top, he will not be able to drive your agenda if he's not well-meaning. Okay. So what we mean, we really mean is, like if you look at the devolution has really dramatically changed the way things happen in this country. If you go to towns like Wajir Road, where you can see tarmac now, and it never used to be there. Though money has also been lost, but that does not mean devolution is not good, because the largest chunk of money that is stolen in this country is stolen at the national government. And there's no doubt about that. Okay. So what we mean is, any proposal to amend the constitution to create positions should be rejected by citizens.
Okay, how do you deal with this phenomena that has plagued this country for the longest time? The reason why our election is hotly contested is because of the winner takes it all. How do you deal with it, especially when you talk about inclusion and you're talking about including tribes, but I'm looking at it more narrowly.
That is actually a lie. The winner takes it all is a narrative that is completely a lie. If you look at the current constitution as it is now, because we are not talking before this constitution, every section of every area in this country is represented by an MCA, an MP, a senator, a governor, and a women rep, and and all these are people who are involved in decision making, sharing of resources. If the national budget process making is a public process. And every constituency in this country is represented. If your MPs goes to parliament and they just approve the budget blindly, like I was saying, that is what they have been doing. They are the people who are actually marginalizing their own people, helping the executive to marginalize them. That will not be solved by creating positions. Because if you look at it in a theoretical scenario, if we create those positions would actually divide this country because they will help the people who play tribal politics to entrench themselves more. Okay. And the winner takes it all narrative is a complete lie in this country because how has it helped? How is it? Nobody has demonstrated that there is a winner takes it all in this country. Because
the winner takes all what?
What?
You know, what is
national government right at the top. The president
takes what? You see,
forms the government, appoints his own people.
Don't forget that at the end of the day, why did we write the constitution the way we wrote it? It is so that we devolve power, so that the presidency is not the end all for every Kenyan. You know the reason why the winner takes all made a lot of sense is because the president made all decisions, particularly on resources, on employment, on everything independent of the imperial presidency. The minute we devolved power, both in terms of devolution and then also put money in devolved governments, we reduce the pressure for winner take all. Ken, the day as a country we sit and say that the only way the people of Ukambani will be sorted out is if there's a Mukamba in the top 5, we have surrendered. Because we are basically saying we don't have institutions, so the only way the people of Northeastern problems will be resolved is if they have someone from Northeastern at the top. So what are we telling Kenyans? That the only way if you want to take us to war, take us there. Because then people will know that if you really want help, you must have your man there. So people will fight to get their man, their woman there.
That's
what
happening.
We should be doing, it's a lie. Let me tell you, it's a lie that we have sold to people. We have forgotten that the constitution moved us from that process. But the leadership continues peddling that story.
And propagating
because
it.
that is the only way they can continue
to get us to buy
maintaining
their
at the
story.
top.
Okay. Can I add in?
Yes.
Because I completely agree. The problem we have is not a legal problem. I think that has been said here, it's a political problem. And it's a problem of a lack of political accountability. I completely agree with Kamodo that the Constitution sought to cure the winner takes all. And the way they did this with devolution is Article 6, talks about distinct governments that will execute their mutual roles in a spirit of consultation. It's cooperation and consultation. So then the Constitution puts a minimum of 15% that should go to the county governments. It doesn't mean that that is the amount that's supposed to go. As it happens, the counties actually are barely scraping around that figure. So the political challenge we have is the national government has not embraced devolution. Instead of devolving resources that would increase the political clout at the county level, it is holding on to these resources. It then turns around and says, we have a legal problem, let's go and amend the Constitution. Whereas in fact, the provisions for sharing revenue are there. Winner takes all. Another aspect is this. Winner takes all is about a lack of electoral accountability. A lack of accountability around elections, and also a lack of accountability by the president and the regime. The Constitution is very clear that we are supposed to regulate the elections. We are supposed to regulate campaign financing and these other aspects that drive a very negative culture around our governance. But what happened? These laws have been watered down. And that is what actually came to plague us in 2017, actually in 2013, and again in 2017, because the laws that were supposed to curb this winner-takes-all mentality, where illicit money, illegal money, corruption money is used to buy the way through elections, those laws were watered down. So what we are seeing as winner-takes-all problem, we are seeing as a county problem, accountability problem, is a failure to implement the law.
Still the same
and
thing.
Kenya has a history from independence of non-implementation.
Non-implementation.
Read our history. Any text that talks about implementation, Kenya has the best policies, best constitution. We are now known all over the world.
But when you
implementation is a crisis. And a report, just as I end up, there was a report that was published by Africog about 3 weeks ago that's receiving quite a lot of coverage and some negative coverage, especially in those political circles, talking about the phenomenon of elite capture. Because we have a political elite that have been able to instrumentalize the institutions of the state for private benefit. Therefore, it is very important for them to remain in control. And they are the same people who are, same interests that are fighting devolution, so that money can remain centralized, determined by people who aren't involved in the budget process, but are able to kangaroo the budget process to drive money into projects that allow actually it's being called large-scale economic crime, being Kenyans are being subjected to.
Okay.
So let's call a spade a spade. The problem we have is these economic criminal interests. And that is what has been binding us since independence.
Okay.
That's the culture that has become engraved.
Okay.
We are now being told, go and amend the constitution. We might go for another amendment. We will leave those interests intact.
Okay.
The problem we have to deal with, we call it corruption on one level. It's deeper than corruption. How do we deal with this phenomenon of elite, of state capture, that courts are even afraid to make rulings? And when there's contempt of court, courts are unable to act. The constitution is being violated every day. Every day, and in fact, this report that was published today shows the violations by the state.
Okay.
That is what we have to deal with, and changing the constitution
Not
will not deal with that.
No,
before I let you go, talk to me about this. Is it possible that the civil society can withstand the pressure from these politicians?
Well, we're going to try, we're going to try. What other option do we have, Ken? We can't opt out of this country.
Okay.
Civil society has been in this space, set the agenda for the constitution in the 90s, actually from the 80s and really strongly in the 90s, and have continued to, advocate for its implementation.
Okay.
I don't think Kenyans, even that question, Kenyans don't have the option of opting out.
Okay.
And we can't opt out and leave it to political, complain about politicians and still leave them to run the process. That is very counterintuitive. In fact, that's not a smart thing to do.
Right.
So we have to, what's the worst that can happen?
Okay.
One of the things that have made even difficult for the implementation of this constitution to almost a significant level is impunity in this country. And that is one of the things that we are trying to address with our amendment, to strengthen the Chapter 6 of the Constitution, such that, like there are several publicly funded inquiries in this country, which named several individuals who are still in government because our courts can do nothing. We're asking the people, let us put this in the Constitution, and it will be like a condition that if you are named in the TJRC report, you cannot hold public office. Because, you see, this is public employment, whether it is elective or you're a public employee, a public servant. So these people should be kicked out from public service, because these are the terms that will be set in the Constitution by the public. Because if we don't deal with impunity in this country, we will never implement any constitution, however beautiful it is. So some of the reasons that we are saying that let us change this constitution, they are based on very cogent reasons. Because if you look at from the Akiumi report, the Kennedy Kirikou report, the TJRC report, all of them are gathering dust in this country. and all the wrongdoers find their way somehow into to government, and there is no way you can use the same people who wronged others, who wronged the population, to correct the wrongs which were done in the past and the present.
Okay.
So for this country to move forward, it must first of all make a decision to weed out the leaders who have been creating problems in this country. If that decision is made by the people, this country will be able to progress. Okay. And that is why we cannot delay the amendment of this constitution now, because people need solutions now, not tomorrow.
Okay, we'll still be going around.
Yeah, yeah. I think, Ken, I mean, and I'm sympathetic to the push for amendments. I think my problem, and I've mentioned some of them, is also, if we are not implementing what we have, even if we amend, you know, what is going to help us, what is going to force us to now implement these ones? You know, and you see, our leadership has become very ingenious in ways to avoid even very clear provisions of the Constitution. In fact, maybe one of the things we should do is provide a criminal sanction for violation of the Constitution. You see, one of the problems is we allow for people to be, we put criminal sanctions on very basic things, but on fundamental issues that will lead to impoverization of Kenyans, to poverty, to violence, we allow people to get away with it. Mm-hmm. A simple example, the law requires that money that is that is payable to counties is released by the Constitution says, you know, as soon as possible. The law says every month. The money is not released. Nobody does anything. I mean, the year comes to an end. By now, I saw the Council of Ghana says only 60% of the money has been released to them. The year is ending in another 2 weeks. So we can just get away with it and nobody has a sanction. And maybe if I was to support a referendum, one of the things I'd like to say is that where there is a direct violation of the Constitution, someone must be found responsible and someone must pay a price. Those are some of the things that we need to do to ensure that we. The other issue is that Kenyans also must start taking responsibility. You see, we complain about leaders all the time. If there's anything that Kenyans love pastime, go to social media, go to newspapers, it is about leaders. 80%, maybe about 10% rig themselves through the system. But 80% of these people are elected by you. And in fact, we don't sleep voting for them. But the day after elections, we start complaining. This constitution, one of the beauties of this constitution is it started making the connection between people's decisions in the leaders they elect and the consequences of those decisions. Kenyans must now recognize that if you elect the wrong governor, there will be consequences. If you elect the wrong MCA, you can't keep asking about the president. Oh, the president hasn't done this. These are the people you elected. Maybe you don't have as much in the president because it goes by parties, but surely you have a role in your MCA, you have MP, you are governor. So in a sense, part of implementation that is lacking is also the citizen has also not taken the responsibility that this constitution requires of the citizen. So in a sense, we are talking about government, and government has a tremendous responsibility, but we must also say to the people that this is your nation. The question that you are saying that will we withstand the politician is an unfortunate country where we have 45 million Kenyans and we have 400 politicians, and we are saying there's nothing we can do. Or rather, at least third way
yes,
are doing what they can with the resources they have. If every Kenyan was doing that, I guarantee you that the politicians are not an issue. But if we sit back there and complain, of course they'll take advantage.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you know, some of the issues that were raised, and you know, I'm very tempted, the arguments that Waweru is making are very appealing, but I then keep coming back to the reality. 2/3 gender principle. This was a very basic principle about inclusion, gender inclusion. It has not been realized.
And why?
And it's an implementation issue.
No, because when people can get away with it, there is no consequence.
There's no political goodwill, no consequence.
It is political goodwill. Court directives notwithstanding, Parliament and political parties particularly have refused to create the mechanisms because political parties have within their ability to ensure that they attain the 2/3 gender principle. Like Kamodo said, the money that's supposed to go to county governments is not being given to county governments in a direct violation of the Constitution of Kenya. So why should we change a constitution when we have a political leadership that's not abiding by the constitution we have now? Should we not deal with that culture? So we are in a crisis. In fact, I look at it this way. We are at a point as Kenyans where we really have to ask ourselves what we are about and whether we are going to opt out of this process or insist politicians need to implement and hold them accountable to that. When looking at the division of revenue process, we actually went into quite a lot of depth. And we found a lot of the bottlenecks are statutory. They are in the public finance management law. Last year, the High Court directed the CS of Treasury to make amendments, to propose amendments to the Public Finance Management Act. He didn't even bother. In terms of how to table the budget this year, he didn't bother. He was given court directives. This was not done. Parliament did not hold the CS to account. They allowed the CS to go on and read a budget and repeat the same offense against the Constitution and another offense this year.
Okay.
Why do we want to change our Constitution? And our problem is the political culture, the politicians we have in office. So the dilemma, I think that, and I really applaud what Third Way Alliance is doing, but we have to deal with the here and now.
Okay.
You know, Ken, we have two problems here. We have failure of implementation of the Constitution, and I've said also impunity. We have also to appeal to the voter. You know, Third Way is a political party, and we actually even fielded a presidential candidate in 2017. We asked as many people as possible to come up and still run for public office because we have to replace the leaders, even the civil society. Don't just talk from sitting on the fence. Because if the system, the people who have been controlling the governance in this country are not challenged, you don't provide alternative leaders, there will still be this problem. So leaders, people have to come out to be leaders and run for public office. If that is not done, you still continue lamenting, making constitutions, making laws, nothing will ever change. So there are things that can be cured by amending the Constitution, and there are things that only be cured at the ballot. So this country, and that is one of the things that I would ask any person who is watching this show, is that they should they should interrogate most of the people who vie for public office, and also refuse to align to the dominant tribal narrative in this country, because it is one of the things that makes people. You don't elect people to go to parliament, people who have independent mind. Because if you have to be elected in a certain region, you have to conform to certain narratives, and that way you get enslaved to a certain kind of thinking. You are not an independent member of parliament. You become a member of parliament for a certain leader of a certain region. So you vacate your mind for the period that you elected, until now you go now to the next election, which maybe you may be asked to pay. In the last election in 2017, I remember a guy who was running for senator in Migori, finding us somewhere with Dr. Ekuru looking for 2 million shillings to take to a political party officials, because that is the price that the certificate was being sold to. And that is something that has been happening in this country. In fact, most of the people you see in parliament are not elected by the people. They were elected by political parties.
Okay.
And because the political parties have shared regions based on tribes, you end up with those kind of leaders who are not accountable to you.
Okay.
In fact, I was going to say that one of the problems, again, which is another side of the discussion we are having, is that we've also got to ensure that the Constitution does not become an orphan. Because I think part of the reason why there can be consistent assault on the Constitution, it's violated and nothing happens, is that the Constitution no longer has ownership, you know, and don't forget that at the point at which the Constitution was enacted, we had the CIC, with all its faults. At least it kept the conversation on violation of the Constitution in the public face. We had the Ministry of Justice, which was the owner at government level of the Constitution. Those institutions are no longer there. We need to find ingenious ways to retain the benefits of the Constitution in the face of the people. And there are many ways in which the media can do that. We're a very negative country. You know, we're very, and maybe that's a good thing, because then it forces us to keep talking about, to keep looking for our better selves. But I think we need to keep reminding people where the Constitution has worked. Okay. And we need to look for those models and bring them so that people then start to own and protect the Constitution, because if it had delivered in Zone X, and has delivered in this institution, there is hope that if it is implemented properly, we can get somewhere.
Okay.
So we need to expand the ownership of the Constitution to the people by telling the positive stories of the Constitution. I've been in 46 of the 47 counties in this country. If you live in Nairobi, you actually believe devolution doesn't work. But you go out of this town,
You will know the
and then
truth.
you will see. Now, that doesn't mean it has done very well. That is with 60% of resources being released. Only 60%. And don't forget that the recurrent expenditure for most county governments is beyond 60%. So actually what the national government pays them is just for salaries.
Okay.
But even with that little money, you find towns that have been reformed, you find infrastructure that is starting to grow. We need to tell those stories so that then people can say these are the benefits of the Constitution and we do not want it violated and we want to protect it, not to let it be taken away by politicians. So we also have a responsibility as a media and civil society and others to tell
these
the good stories.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right there. We're coming back. We're taking a break. When we come back, I'd like to talk about the responsibility. I want to apportion responsibilities to what's happening. Where does the buck stop? Is it Parliament? Is it the judiciary? Is it the executive? And we know the legislature has been captured by the executive. But more importantly, I want to know if there's the role that the judiciary has failed to play to ensure that the Constitution is implemented. And that's the reason why we're asking this question. And that's why Wanjiru is saying, even if we had another Constitution, or was it you saying, if we had another Constitution and we don't implement, what will happen? So let's take a break. And when we come back, we address those issues.
2019 SportPesa Cup winners Kariobangi Sharks.
And welcome back to Sidebar. With me in studio, we have taken the seat out because Mheshimiwa Junet couldn't make it. Wanjiru Gikonyo, National Coordinator TISA, Kamotho Waiganjo, an advocate, Miruru Waweru is the chairperson of Third Way Alliance, and of course, I am right here to moderate this discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, let's apportion some responsibility. I have just realized that 90% of what we're going through, even 90% of the reasons why we need to change the constitution right now can be sorted out by a simple implementation of the 50% that Wakili says that has not been touched, right? So where does the buck stop? Where do we have the greatest responsibility? Does the judiciary have anything to do with this?
Of course they do. The responsibility rests on all of us because under the constitution we are all bound to play our various roles. The judiciary, and part of the audit that has been done by Katiba found this, the judiciary has done very well in defending the constitution and in defending devolution. They have made very strong court rulings that have stopped the onslaught against devolution because Kenya is a country that has a history of re-centralization, like I said. It sounds a bit like a conspiracy theory, but if we had time to go step by step, you'd understand very well this is the reality of Kenya. There are interests that do not want to see power going to the people because that's what devolution is. The judiciary has been very steadfast in standing against those powers. But then we've seen that Parliament is a bully, a really big bully, because they've been using the powers that were given to them by the Constitution to intimidate institutions like the judiciary, the SRC. Any institution that stands up to Parliament is then, or to the National Executive in this case, in certain cases, is getting a lot of pushback. So the judiciary is getting pushback. Civil society, of course, we also have a responsibility. We have been active, promoting, we've been working with government, maybe not working as well with this government, but working with some government departments, working with counties to promote devolution. I think what we haven't done enough of as civil society is to go out to the citizens and to do the political education that needs to take place so that citizens are able to cut through these ethnic cleavages that are holding them captive and realize when, you know, it's unfortunate we were not able to enable Kenyans to see that 2017 and maybe even 2013, the government they were voting for was not just an ethnic government. It was a government that had a lot of private sector interests. And what has happened now could have been predicted because that's how they thought. And if we, as our democracy matures, we will begin to identify parties possibly with their economic policies, because the Jubilee economic policy is actually at odds with the Constitution in many regards. Devolution does not go in line with the Jubilee economic approach. They need large infrastructure projects. They can't afford to have money going down to the counties. They actually don't want strong decentralization. That is their economic policy, despite the fact that their manifesto lied about it a little bit. Had we done the proper political education, Kenyans would have seen, okay, this government is going to be quite, is going to undermine my ability to have local voice. Of course, we didn't anticipate the level of indiscipline that has happened around the borrowing and the level of corruption that has come with it, but that has come to bear. Council of Governors has also done very well in protecting the space. Institutions like the CIC that are now defunct also did very well. Citizens have also done their part. Citizens are engaging very actively at county level. The problem is that in many instances they engage, but they don't see the results coming back because counties either do not respond, either because they are not able, because in reality quite a few counties are doing paper budgets because the money they have is only enough to pay salaries and provide essential services because of this division of revenue issue. Other counties, it's an ideological issue. You've got governors who do not understand that power did not come to them, it went to the people. So we need to work on all of these aspects together. We need to encourage ourselves because we have come a long way. No one gives up power they've enjoyed easily. Like we said, the Constitution is a citizen project, and it was forced on our political elite to give power to the citizens. So citizens need to understand this power has to be grabbed. The Constitution gives us a legal, non-violent way to grab that power, but we must grab it.
And the politicians will not allow us to do that, right?
No. It's not allow us. We must
we
make
must
them.
do it. Kamoda, I want to hear from you the role of the judiciary, or the possible role of the judiciary in what's happening. Because as I said, I hear you, and I feel a lot of our problems, current and challenges, could just be solved by a simple adherence to the law, the way it is.
Yeah. Ken, when the Constitution was passed, the citizen did most of what they needed to do in terms of the reform project. What they did is they put a responsibility on government to implement the bulk of the Constitution. So if you look at the responsibilities in the public finance chapter, in the devolution chapter, in the national security chapter, a lot of the responsibilities are actually responsibilities of government. And by government, I mean the different institutions. Parliament has its role in ensuring we have the proper legislative framework, and it is oversighting the executive. So it has a responsibility. The executive has a role of implementing the various programs. The judiciary's role is to ensure that if any of those institutions either are not doing what they are doing or they are crossing the line, then you stop them. That is the responsibility of the judiciary. Now, my view is that the Parliament itself has been a disappointment, a huge disappointment, because when the Constitution was changed, a lot of the previous responsibilities of the executive were actually reposited on the legislature on the assumption that these are the representatives of the people. One of the most important responsibilities that government has is the power of the purse. How do you distribute resources? That had always been the responsibility of the executive. That responsibility and taken to the legislature. The legislature has been abusing it. When the legislature tells an institution that we are unhappy with you, so therefore we are going to reduce your budget, expressly. And when you were in the CIC, I can tell you time and time again, I appeared before Parliament, and Parliament used to say, you keep making those sorts of statements, we will not give you any money.
And
so,
did they
they would reduce the budget, but we lived with it. You know, in fact, part of the reason why we said we don't want an extension of our term is that we were tired. You know, because people make it look like you're doing a public service for their benefit. So in a sense, the legislature has been a disappointment. The executive, if you look at the executive, as both national government and county government level, there have been some successes, but at the national government level, there's been a lot of disappointments. One in terms of facilitating devolution, and in the other way of ensuring that we're using our resources prudently and without wastage. The judiciary has probably been the stronger institution in ensuring that they protect the principles of the Constitution. Has it been perfect? Of course not, because the judiciary is also operating in a context. Now, where I think there has been failure, a lot of times is also the citizen many times has folded its hands. I tell people, if you live in county governments, why is it that there is wastage of resources, open wastage of resources? We're not talking about the ones of people fighting with, but we're talking about actual wastage of resources. And citizens are doing nothing. I still remember when we started, citizens would actually be meeting and saying, look, where have those lorries that are, how much have they been bought for? And people would actually turn up at the offices of their respective governors and raise those questions. So I'm saying that the citizen also needs to own the responsibility of holding government accountable. Remember, you know, it's American ambassadors who used to say choices have consequences. The choice that we made about this Constitution has consequences. One of those consequences is that the responsibility on the citizen was raised. So we need to actually empower the citizen, and that is a responsibility, again, of those of us in the non-state actor community, including the media, to start educating the citizen, empowering the citizen, so that the citizen can play its rightful role. But ultimately, the responsibility of implementation is largely the responsibility of the various arms of government.
Okay, you agree, and I want you to tell me if, in your thoughts, the weakest link in this could also be the National Assembly.
You know, our National Assembly, especially from 2013 to date, has been a little serious disappointment in this country. They have not lived to what they were elected to do. Look at the division of revenue bill. They have always passed it using the wrong financial statement, revenues, audited revenues. So denying counties, that is colluding with the national government to deny counties money. Whereas all these MPs, where they were elected, their core constituencies are the counties. So they're actually working against their voters who elected them. So you see, these are people who are working against even the voters who elected them. In fact, I would say, I don't know whether this is good to say on national TV, there would be no much difference if we had taken some few monkeys in that house instead of the 416 guys who are currently there. Because a large number of them, not all of them, have no interest of the people at heart. Look at now, people who have been paid a good salary, they have been given a low interest mortgage of 3%, then they are coming to us for a house allowance. Who gives a mortgage, low interest mortgage and house allowance? 20 million mortgage. So you see, this is there's so much contempt and impunity in this country that we have even to ask the voter, we have to have a paradigm shift on how we vote. Now, the other institution that has been doing very well on implementation of the Constitution and guarding the Constitution is also now, with the risk of being cited for contempt, we filed a case against the Building Bridges Initiative on 13th December last year at the certificate of urgency. The case has not been heard to date, and it's because there seems to be deliberate effort from the court's registry to be allocating our case to a judge who is either being transferred or going on leave. There's sabotage in the judiciary, and something needs to be done in this judiciary now, because it seems now the executive has reared its ugly head back to the judiciary. Because now suing the Building Bridges is something that is affecting some serious political prayers in this country, and they seem to be manipulating the process so that this case shall not be heard. Imagine a case, and we have asked the court, how would you not hear a case at a certificate of urgency, a case which is about violation of the Constitution? Are you allowing the violators of the Constitution to continue? I would not mind even if they cite me for contempt, but that is the fact of the matter. That case should have been heard by now. This is about 7 months now.
And it's still not heard.
Yeah, the judiciary is now in bed with the executive, helping the executive to violate the Constitution. We have given like 7 cogent reasons why we think the BBI is unconstitutional. But the court has been programmed such that our case will never be heard until they complete the process. They are playing politics in court.
Yeah, actually, what we are seeing is...
That is the truth of the matter. Even if they were to cite me for contempt, I'm ready to suffer the consequences. That's the truth of the matter.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think we need to be very aware that we have an autocratic regime that's very uncomfortable with the democratic principles of the Constitution. And if you remember that some of the first actions that this regime took when they came into office was actually to stage a very strong onslaught against civil society, calling them the evil society. And for the first 2 years, actually, civil society was fighting for survival because of the onslaught of the state. And, you know, standing up against the state is no mean feat. Now, that has appeased somewhat. But this administration is very strategic in terms of undermining and of controlling institutions. And much as I said, the judiciary has been very instrumental in terms of defense of the Constitution, defense of devolution, and recognizing they're not perfect. There has been very deliberate efforts to undermine the independence of the judiciary. And we are seeing moves in some of the transfers, in some of the appointments, in the battles around the Judicial Service Commission to capture the judiciary. If we lose the judiciary, we'll be done. So actually, we are at a point in our country where we have an administration that speaks very well, talks a very good talk, and is able to really cover up what its real intentions are. And that's why I was saying we have to do political education so Kenyans can read between the lines.
Okay.
We have economic mismanagement. We've got very autocratic type of leadership that's being staged in terms of emasculating accountability institutions, denying Auditor General money, denying the COB money, undermining, institutions that actually should be holding the executive to account. That is the reality. The idea of changing the Constitution, that's a sideshow. The reality is we've got abject impunity by the state, and that's the crisis that we need to deal with.
And the reality, Ken, is that there's been rollback on the reform project. I think the vigor with which this journey started in 2010 has sort of slowed down, and there have been consequential changes, and some of those is the judiciary, so that you have components of the judiciary that are doing pretty well, but you also find that, you know, there are now more regressive and retrogressive elements in the judiciary that are happening. So, and one shouldn't be surprised, you know, because the judiciary operates in a context, you know. So for as long as the context is an anti-reform, anti-constitution context, then you're going to find that those anti-constitution, anti-reform elements of the judiciary become stronger. You know, for as long as the country was moving towards a reformist direction, then if you're anti-reform, you stood out. But now you have an increasing community of people who are anti-reform and who are violators of the constitution. So in a sense, we need to, if we believe that part of solving the problems of this country is sorting out our constitutional problems, because don't forget that this constitution was not made in a context. We didn't wake up one day and just decided, I think it would be lovely to have some nice constitution. We came from a history, and that history was problems that were identified over a period of almost 10 years. Those problems were then reflected in this document. So if we still believe that those problems are still there, and that this document, not perfect, it has its challenges, but it resolves maybe 70% of our problems, then we need to collectively own that project.
Okay.
And don't forget that the politicians, these ones and the ones before, were never in favor of a constitution. So I don't know why we expect that people who didn't support the constitution will now favor implementing it. You know, they won't.
They won't.
Yeah.
They won't.
But Ken, there's also another critical sector in this country that needs to support a reformist agenda. If you look at most, and now I'll come to the media, I'm not attacking the media. If you look at most of your headlines, they actually seem to be moving the mwananchi towards these antagonistic politics, dramas, instead of the real issues. Root of this, root of that, right of this, right of that. Instead of bringing the main real issues that affect the ordinary people and exposing these kind of things, we would urge the media sector to try and help, because if this country goes down, it goes down with the media, with everyone. Let us stop giving a lot of space to this nonsense. Because once you amplify, you give nonsense a lot of space. The people who, every person in every corner of this country relies on radio, TV, or newspaper to be able to follow up on what is the agenda in this country. So if the media houses that we have, and you have done very well as media in the last 20, 30 years in the reform agenda of this country, we have to move from lionizing some individuals who are destroying this country to even giving space to another generation that seems committed to change this country. Okay. Because if we keep on giving space to people who are destroying this country, and if you go to every newspaper in the last 365 days, most of the content on the headline is about mostly, quote unquote, not only politics, destructive politics.
Yeah.
Okay.
So your promoters, we would say, generally, there is also an aspect of media contributing to bringing down any reforms in this country. And though you have supported in a way, but it is when you give headlines to destructive politics, you become part and parcel of the people who destroy this country. And making the national conversation a petty conversation.
I mean, honestly, to be honest, who cares about tanga? Honestly, if you look at the problems of this country, right now you ask the people in River Road, they're dealing with issues of taxation, a lot of overregulation, importation. Do they really care about whether these politicians move from here to these other places? Who cares? But if you check tomorrow morning,
the headlines,
all the headlines are going to be also and so said, and so in a sense we also need to start shifting the conversation, and that's why I talked about even lionizing those things that we are doing right. You talked about sectors, private sector. You know, the people who pay a significant price. And I'm not talking about so-called industry owners. I'm talking about the average business person, the person who's struggling in the commercial sector, small industry, SMEs. Those people must also now get together in communities of interest. Yeah, communities of interest.
Decide even who should be president, who should not.
Yeah, because they're even the ones who fund politicians. So I'm just saying this resignation, you know, by 40 million Kenyans because of 1,000 people is irresponsible. And I'm saying that irresponsibility must not, at the very minimum, be owned by the media. Because we underrate the impact of the media. We totally underrate the impact of the media. People listen. Listen to radio stations.
They influence the narrative.
They influence the narrative. But if the narrative is on those two issues, It may be exciting, but it is not helping this country move anywhere.
I pray that the media helps us to stop elevating mediocrity to any level.
We do our best. We do our best.
That's why we are here.
That's why we are here.
Yeah, we are giving you.
You know, we are having a partner. That's why you are hosting us.
And a lot of people like this conversation, by the way, online. A lot of people like what you're saying. National Taxpayers Association, for example, says constitutionally, the Parliament of Kenya has a role in oversight and negotiation of debt. They have failed, only concerned with their welfare. They are a serious disappointment. So some of the people who agree with this entirely, the National Assembly. You know, several areas have been the government have been cited for failing Kenyans, but I think the weakest link, most of the time, the parliamentarians, when they sit here, they tend to disagree. But it's said that the weakest link, because they are, so to say, a puppet of the executive. A lot of these things that are happening right now will not happen if they were independent. Do you agree? So that brings me to the conversation of what would you think if there was real, not imagined, practical separation of power in this country? What will happen, Kamoto, if that was real?
You see, you can never have, because these institutions work together to move towards a certain direction. So we're not talking about a separation of power that is impractical. But what you're saying is let every institution take its responsibility independently, so that Parliament only considers, when it is making laws, what is good in terms of constitutional principles. Don't worry that will make the executive unhappy. When you come to the judiciary must not keep its ears open, listening, what does the executive think? The problem in our institutions is many institutions are always watching, they're always watching what is going to happen to us if we go this way. We have a huge responsibility, and that's why I'm talking about Parliament. Parliament was given all the powers. When you talk about the imperial presidency, a lot of them. That is why the president can't appoint anyone unless Parliament approves. The president can't sign a budget unless Parliament makes that budget. The allocations of revenue can't be done unless Parliament does it. Now, if Parliament was carrying its responsibilities purely according to the principles of the Constitution, a lot of these problems would be there. If the executive went wrong, they would hold the executive accountable. They would be impeaching ministers. They would be calling them to account. If they don't do that, ultimately the failure of our institutions is going to be made by whether or not Parliament succeeds.
Okay.
Yeah, obviously we need alternative political platforms, but we also need alternative media narratives. We need to change how we are doing business, because we can't be, again, stuck in the fact that we've been let down by politicians. I think the quality of legislators in Parliament has been diminishing with every electoral cycle. I don't know how that's possible and why that's happening, but each Parliament comes out and is more, does things that are worse than the one that preceded it. So we know we have a problem, Ken, and I think the first point is to acknowledge it, but also to embolden ourselves and say we are going to be part of the change. Okay. And I like what we are saying here. Part of the way forward is look at parties like Third Wave. I may not fully support the fact that they are going for referendum change, but the issues they have articulated, those are pertinent issues. Those are the issues we want to address. We need media to also come on board and let's start talking about issues. Civil society, let us do the political education. Let us form this alliance for change. And actually it's an alliance to implement the Constitution and force these few people who are sitting there tyrannizing it over us to actually, let's flip the game. Okay. I think we can.
In fact, on that note still, if you look at when us guys started the Punguza Mizigo campaign, at least you guys in the nation media, you have published sometimes in the papers and TV, you may find that the content of our bid is very few media houses that have gone out to explain what really we are bringing forward to the people. But when you look at those narratives of constitutional debates, which are actually neither in any form anywhere, they are being debated somewhere, even a lot of morning sessions, and they're just street talk. So I think it is good, and we are not bashing the media so that you don't ban me from coming to this show anytime. We want to be hosted and also explain, make the case for this, and we would ask the media, because you are our brothers. Today you work in the media, tomorrow you'll be out. Move this country forward. It is for everyone's benefit. It is for this a business like Nation Media, Citizen, KTN's good. If this country moves forward, every person will do business. You'll be able to move all along better all of us.
Okay.
So I think media, civil society,
Can come together.
Academia, professional associations.
You know, some things really disturb us. If you look at Nairobi County, you look at Makueni elected a person with a PhD. This county is the home of most university graduates. They could not elect even a PhD or a person with a vast managerial experience in this town. We have to rethink how we elect our people.
Okay.
Even though academic criteria is
Not
not the only
leadership, because there are so many
leadership
people who have the
listen,
academic
you see,
qualifications,
leadership
but
qualities.
they
But
don't
listen,
do
but
a
listen,
good work.
qualities.
But listen, you know, it's not only, I'm not only voting for academic qualifications, leadership qualities. If you look at why do most corporates also, we should not trivialize education, because when you are going to run like for governor or even president, you need to understand things like law, public finance, and all of those things. So if you cannot be able to understand, even you'll be misread by your advisors.
No, not
you need to have basic understanding even of all these things, and you need an education to do
Well,
that.
we're not trivializing
The reason
education,
you are-
but really emphasizing leadership, because we also have PhDs who are sitting in parliament and are doing terrible things.
Doctors
so
and lawyers,
we must
the
begin to identify the qualities of
But
leaders.
you see, the point I was coming
and,
to is
and elect
most of
good
the
leaders.
educated middle class, in fact, even refuse to vote. If you look at the about 5 million people who never voted in 2017, most of them, majority of them in the first election are the literate people.
Okay.
Well, and that's a failure. You see, the truth of the matter is, if we took, even as and let me call myself part of the elite, if we took our responsibility seriously, we don't just have a vote. We have influence. You know, we have influence. I can count the number of people I can talk to, and because it is me talking to them, they may not understand anything else, but say they'll trust me. You know, and so there's a responsibility we have also which we have not taken. And I think. And I think my concern about the conversation in this country is always about blame. There are very few times we ever ask what is it about action by ourselves, because there's a very huge community of interest that we have. But in a sense, we expect politicians to look out for us, and we're not looking for ourselves, out for ourselves. So in a sense, the conversation that we must keep asking Kenyans, yes, we must hold these people accountable. Yes, we must continue to push them. But what is it that we ourselves must continue to do? Because if we have an educated electorate and well-informed electorate, an electorate that connects its decisions to the leaders that it has and the consequence of that leadership, I guarantee you that consistently we're going to keep improving our politics. Otherwise, what we are doing now is regressing our politics, and that cannot be good for this nation.
All right. The other question that I wanted to ask, we've run out of time. So even as you comment on the cartoon of the day, my question is, does what we have spoken about today have anything to do with the person on top? Does it have everything, again, to do with the person on top? Or does it have just something to do with the person on top? Because, again, he alone cannot do everything for this country. But even as you think of that, let's take a look at this cartoon, and then we can each give a view on that. Right, the cartoon will be on the screens around you, so you are able to see it. Right. This stems from that Akorino conference that we had over the weekend, and a lot of people say that the president is all speech but very little action. So even as you speak, does this depend on the person on top? And do you think he has something to offer regarding giving a way forward in all these things? Or he also has to wait for people to speak and then come later? I'll begin with you, Andre.
Well, of course it does. Leadership is about the person on top. And what we are saying is we have a failure of leadership. And executive power, overall executive power is vested in the president. So the fact that we have a debt crisis, we have non-implementation of the Constitution, persistent violation of the Constitution, is directly, placed at his feet. But it's not just the president. We've got leadership also in, for instance, these independent commissions. There was an audit done in the process that we went through today. And there was, an issue was pointed out that commissions have powers that are then not being exercised because of the fear of those people who are placed in leadership. So we have a leadership problem. The highest responsibility, yes, vests with the president. The nature of the political engagement we are having, the policies of the regime, the economic policies actually of the president or of the regime are directly, that's the direct responsibility of the president. So I would say the biggest failures have to be apportioned to the president. And in any other country, you know, the president and his government would have resigned because of the debt situation that we have. We are facing a government shutdown. Again, if they're not able to deal with that, in any other country, they should have resigned. So let us not sanitize violations of the Constitution. Let us not sanitize failures of economic policy. Let's hold the president to account, not because we don't like him, not because we are not jubilant or whatever, but because we deserve good governance.
Okay.
You see, the buck stops with the president. He's the supreme leader of this country for the next few years because he was elected. And but my view on what happened in Kasarani, I try sometimes to see things beyond what an ordinary eye can see. The rant by the president could have easily been planned to whip emotions.
Okay.
To the people in the regions he controls, so that they can be able to move in their constitutional or whatever the Building Bridges initiative wants to achieve, because they know how our voters react. When the president looks like a victim, he can be able to be defended by the community. So one of the things that most ordinary eyes may not be able to know is that that could have been the intention.
I think, Ken, the truth of the matter is that, like it or not, the presidency is still a very powerful institution. We may have reduced some of its powers in the Constitution, but we cannot run away from our history. And sometimes perception is more important than reality. People still consider the presidency a very powerful institution. Nothing explains that than the March 9th handshake. You imagine a country that was almost in a state of paralysis, we're almost going to war. Two gentlemen stand on the end without any change in the law, without any reform of the Constitution, without the reform of any institution. They shake hands and the country comes down. So whether we like it or not, the presidency has a lot of responsibility. The presidency sets the mood of the country. So with that comes a lot of responsibility. Because of that power comes a lot of responsibility. And that responsibility we must see it exercised in every sphere. Because ultimately, is it Harris Truman who used to have a board that says the buck stops here? One of the American presidents used to say the buck stops here. The president and you know, if you are the governor of Makueni, you are the governor of Wajir, you need to have a board that says, in this county, the buck stops here.
Okay.
In this country, the buck stops here. Does that mean you're the one with all the powers? Of course not. But ultimately, you set the tone, you set the mood. If the president is angry, the country gets angry. If the president, that is the reality of the history we are coming from. How I pray for the day when these things won't matter as much and our institutions will be very strong, but we are not there yet. So in the meantime, that responsibility must be exercised by none other but those who hold executive power at that level. At the counter level, at the executive level, the Speaker of the House. We need to see people who have been given those sorts of responsibility, taking responsibility for the operations of the institutions that they head.
All right. As we wind up, your final remark.
Final remark is to encourage Kenyans. We have a progressive constitution that we voted for, and we need to stand up and defend it and not be intimidated by the political tanga-tanga speak out there. Let us focus on the agenda of benefiting the public good.
Okay. Aweru?
I would ask Kenyans to support, and specifically I would also address this to most of the members of the county assemblies. In the event that we get a nod from IBC that our signatures are, we have 1 million valid signatures, that they vote for this initiative so that we can be able to strengthen some of the areas that we intend to strengthen on this constitution. Our belief as third way is that our constitution is still good, but it needs to be made a bit better. We are not amending the constitution on the premise that it's a bad constitution. It's on the premise that we want to make it better.
Okay.
That is the thinking of third way.
Okay.
I think three things. One is on the whole question of the constitution amendment. If I could get a guarantee that we shall not go backwards and that we shall improve the constitution, I'll be one of the greatest supporters of that. My fear is that if we go the amendment route, we will sneak in other things to make it even worse. That is actually my fear. So I'd rather live with its problems than risk
what you don't know.
Number two is something that he has said. For you to know just the sort of country we are, do you know we have a dysfunctional IEBC? We're heading towards a census, we're heading towards a referenda, we're heading towards an election. We have a dysfunctional commission, and it's okay. You know, if that doesn't worry anyone, but meanwhile we're talking tanga, sijui kieleweka, sijui kitoeleweka, but we have a crisis that can cause us to go to war if we don't have a functional IBC.
They've said they're okay.
Oh, they are not okay.
They've said
that before.
We live in this country. They've always been okay. Finally, the
yeah.
truth of the matter is that as a country, we've made strides. I think it's very possible for us to just show what hasn't worked. But true that we've made strides. If you remember this country 15 years ago, I mean, this is a country where the judiciary can nullify a presidential election and the country doesn't come to an end. We continue. That tells you that we are strengthening in terms of institutional frameworks. So let us continue to grow from where we are. Let us not take the risk of moving backwards. And my fear is that in some areas we are moving backwards. Let's keep going forward and grow on the things that we have, the gains we have achieved.
Great, and well said. So let's do the final part of the show before we end. Now this week, the son of Jomo was furious. He took to his native language to express himself. It helped that the audience was made up of majority from his tribe. Now, the scathing attack on rebel politicians allied to Deputy President William Ruto ended up with a warning and a dress down. In summary, he told his critics and rebel politicians he will crush them. Now, the response was swift from the Rift Valley, the backyard of the Deputy President, and Central Kenya, which is his backyard. Well, the son of Jomo is a perfect student of his father. Let's take you back 50 years ago. The date is October 26th, 1969. The headline, that is it, "I'll crush you, a furious Mzee tells KPU." Now, the opposition party that was led by the late Jaramogi Oginga Odinga. A day before this headline that is on your screen, the 25th of October, 1969, President Jomo Kenyatta was in Kisumu to open the Russia Hospital. Now today it's known as the New Nyanza General Hospital, a hospital constructed by funds sourced from Russia. And in July 1969, trade unionist Tom Mboya had been assassinated on Government Road. Now it's called Moi Avenue, just behind here. Against the backdrop, President Jomo Kenyatta visited Kisumu to officially open that hospital, Russia. And confrontation seemed inevitable between Kenyatta and Jaramogi. Let's tell you something else about that date. 2 years ago, the 26th of October 2017, was the date of the repeat presidential election and President Uhuru Kenyatta's birthday. Well, not so significant, but the coincidence in the dates. A good place to end tonight's show. Thank you very much, Wanjiru. Thank you, Waweru, and thank you, Kamodo. Always a pleasure.
I was going to say the interesting players.
Yes.
It was Raila Odinga
and
Uhuru Kenyatta, Oginga Odinga, and Jomo Kenyatta.
I left that to the viewers. Right, thank you, gentlemen, for coming. And have a good night. Next week on Tuesday, same place, same time. Good night.